Welcome to Translation Confidential. This is Peter Argondizzo and Patrick Daley. It's episode 134, and the title is Language Solution Integrator. What the hell is that? Patrick, why don't we start with you telling us what that is?
Yeah, I know longtime listeners will have heard the acronym we use quite a bit, LSPs, for language service providers. I think that's pretty industry standard at this point. If you hear that, you know what we're talking about. But we saw a few posts from Slater following their SlaterCon event a few weeks ago, and they kind of coined the term Language Solutions Integrator, or LSI. So that is a term that they have been kind of putting out into the market. So we want to kind of unpack what that means and how it might be the same or different from LSP. So the way that they define it, an LSI it describes an organization whose core offering is to deliver fit for purpose multilingual content solutions by integrating language technology and AI with human experts as part of a fully managed solution. So short and sweet.
Yeah,
on that definition.
I mean, if we try to unpack that and figure out what that means, I think it's, in my mind, it's, hey, this is a translation agency, though I know they don't want to use that word, a translation services firm that can go get the content where it lives. In other words, can understand what it's like, focusing on the result, which I actually love, right? It's saying, hey, I have this pocket of content that lives over here, or these pockets of content that live over here, and I need to figure out how to leverage multiple resources. And those resources might be, the expert in the loop. It might be an LLM. It might be the translation management system that has, all of the content, the previously translated content. It might be, a trained engine in Azure. And then, it might have a client review loop. In other words, it's really looking at, we don't just translate documents, we provide a workflow. And we've had for a while now our tagline being that we're essentially a bespoke translation services firm. In other words, that we create bespoke solutions, or solutions that are tailored to our clients' needs. And I love this. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's funny, I saw, sort of all these ancillary posts on LinkedIn, and I saw some translators, getting a little bit upset and calling out the semantics on it. And I think some of that
Wait a minute, language nerds calling out the semantics? No.
Exactly. And I think, what their underlying issue is that AI is at the heart of this, right? That essentially there's some artificial intelligence that maybe helps with the routing of the content. Not maybe, it does. Helps with the routing of the content, helps with filling in the gaps of where translation doesn't exist. And again, I'm going to say it again. I've said it a million times. Yes, this is changing things, but it's here. So you can dig in your heels, but that's not going to help anything. The technology's here. We have to get comfortable with it. And I think we all have to understand what our new roles are in this new reality and celebrate it. Again, one of the things that I liked in Bruno's post, and I think, Bruno Bitter from Blackbird is really one of the thought leaders in our industry, as well as Florian Faze from Slater, who we quote so much. He's probably tired of it. But it's just that, hey, this is the new language industry. And one of the big points in Bruno's post on LinkedIn was that the market's going to continue to grow. We're looking at 31.7 billion this year. And while I think that there's we've talked about the headwinds, legislative pressures, tariffs, the like, and sort of the rejiggering of how that revenue is generated. Some of the tools that are now incorporating translation are essentially earning some of that revenue as well. So it's a challenge for LSPs, LSIs,
LSIs, come on.
But here's what I'm going to say, though. Not all language service firms can call themselves LSIs.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think, even looking back, 10 years ago for me at this point of starting at Argo and getting some of those website connectors stood up, that was kind of the early signs of where things were moving. It's like, hey, I've got this website. How do I translate it? I don't want to do a ton of work. So that's where something like a WPML connector comes into play. You hook up the website to a translation management system, and we're ready to roll. It's a very simple process to get those two things connected to talk to each other. There definitely was a level of automation in that, but I don't think it ever got to the point of just, flip the switch and do a full circle automation. There were always QA checks and human stops in that process, which I think is something they mention here of the expert in the loop to make sure that there's still people in that workflow, and doing things that only people can do to a certain level of quality. So I think that's a really interesting point that they make as well. I think for me, it kind of, like, sure, you can call it this, like, it doesn't, I'm not gonna be like, oh no, it's LSP all the way, like, that's fine. I think really the big thing that I take away from it is, like, these are the really tech forward LSPs that can call themselves LSIs. Like you said, the technology's here. You can either run from it or run with it, and those that run with it will kind of rise to the top, I think. But as someone who's been at kind of a marketing agency for the past couple of years, I did have to laugh at something I also saw on LinkedIn. Was for what I would imagine this company considers themselves an LSI, but they were promoting a couple job listings they had, and they listed their solution as our AI driven all-in-one translation solution, launched a few weeks ago. And I was like, what in the world does that mean? It seems like all marketing mumbo jumbo that, like, I have no idea what you're actually talking about. So I think
Well,
there will be a lot of that out in the market of, like, marketing speak and like powered by AI, blah, blah, and, like, I think as a buyer, I would advise, like, okay, great. What does that mean? Like, tell me, like, I'm a 10-year-old, like, what exactly is happening? How are you using AI? And how does it help me as the buyer save money, time, energy, whatever it is?
absolutely. I mean, I think, one of the things that I've talked about is separate, and we've talked about on this podcast over the years about a whole host of topics, right? The spirit of translation confidential is, separating, the BS from the reality. And that's one of the things that I get a little bit upset at when I go to, a conference like I was just at. I was at the Association of Training and Development Conference in DC. And again, just like we see at DevLearn, you see a lot of the technology that is in the e-learning space and in the the training space, right? So one of the things that annoys me is that a lot of these solution sets, it's not sexier than the fact that they just hook themselves into an LLM and they say we now have instant translation. Well, you do, but I think that's where it's that caveat emptor that we talk about. It's the buyer needs to beware, because the situation with that is that are you addressing data security? I think most of them are, and but how is that data used? Is it pooled with all the other people that are doing the translation at the same time? Is there ability to train? Train the engine so that it gets a certain amount of results? Is there an ability for using a glossary, which will just that act alone of including do not translate terms and including terminology that you accept, exponentially improves the results. I think the thing that I always want to warn against is that simply connecting one tool to an AI engine, that's not sexy at all in any way, shape, or form. To me, that's like a simple solution. And I think what I hope is that the comments from Florian at SlaterCon and Bruno shining a light on this is that the sexy part of these discussions is that you can focus the effort and bring in other resources to make this an effective solution, and not just simply throwing a pile of content at an LLM, which I think is a really easy out and not sexy and not helpful and not useful. Because guess what? If you have a developer that has some time, 10 minutes later, you can figure out a way to just chuck a bunch of content in an LLM, and that's not exciting.
Yeah, I mean, just think about, even I'm kind of thinking of it in, like, just how you use any Gen AI tool. I mean, I use ChatGPT most, but it's like, think about if you chuck in a crappy prompt of vague, broad, whatever it might be, and think of the crap you get out. But if you get really specific and customized or tailored or whatever word we want to use there, the output is exponentially better. So like you're saying, like, to me, using ChatGPT is just like hooking it up to something, but then when you refine it and kind of customize it, like, that's where you're really gonna make strides and have something that can be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that I really liked in Bruno's post in highlighting the whole discussions that happened at SlaterCon is where he talked about the second part of it, the language technology platform, that, hey, TMSs are a thing of the past. And I think what he's trying to say there is that TMSs are now only part of the equation. What you really want to look at is a language technology platform. And in the post, he says, and I quote, architected from the ground up for orchestration, microservices, data, APIs, RAG, and LLMs. The key UI is a visual workflow editor with drag and drop capabilities. He's talking about Blackbird for defining processes and business logics. And I love that. So what is it that Blackbird does, or what is it, that our homegrown SharePoint connector does? Is it allows you to bring in other resources. I think for those of you that don't know what RAG is it's retrieval augmented generation. So essentially what it's just saying is that you can put things in an order of priority. So before just chucking things at an LLM, you can say, hey, look at this repository first. Maybe it's look at this trained Azure machine translation engine first. Then go to the LLM for the parts that are missing. Then the workflow editor that Bruno's talking about is then you decide, hey, this pile of segments needs to go to the expert in the loop. This pile of segments are 100% matches from previous work. Isolate those. We don't need to do those. So I think, that's where the power of this whole idea of the LSI and the language technology platform come into play. I love it.
Yeah, I think this to me is screaming strong project management, because that's something you think through. Any good project manager is going to think through workflow. It's like, okay, what are the steps we need to do to get to this endpoint? And I think knowing the right people, resources, energy, budget to throw at each step of that is super important. So to me, like this is music to my ears as a process nerd and someone who's like, okay, we know where we need to get, and now let's figure out and roll up our sleeves and how to get there.
Well, and I think it's also going to put a challenge on, and I like this because my new focus is in business development here at our group at Argo. And I think this puts a little more pressure on the business development folks as well. So in other words, have to do a far better job of interacting with the client and focusing on the final outcome. I think in years past, hey, I need this translated. Okay, well, tell me how you get the content. Where does it come from? What do you need to do with it afterwards? Because guess what? Now the LSIs can provide value there and say, well, listen, I can go get that content. I can go get it once a day. I can go get it 3 times a week. I can go get it 3 times a day. How often do you need to get it? How often does it need to be, how often do you need us to deliver it? How quickly do you need it back? What level of service are you okay with? Do you want to choose levels of service based on the type of content it is? These are all things that can be automated. And I think what's interesting is it's going to create more pressure also between sales and production to understand what assets you have for a given client. So, hey, this is a new client, different discussion. We don't have translation memory. We don't have glossaries. So maybe we need to create some of those things. You can create a style guide and ask the LLM to adhere to the style guide. Like these are all things that you can do by prompt. Simple creation of some glossaries. You can train an engine. So all these things now go into the sales process, then scoping the solution. For us, a huge focus is going to be on these workflows. Right now, it's a smaller percentage of our client base. We have a few very large clients that are doing that. But I think what's going to happen is more and more clients are going to be looking for an easier solution. And I know I'm really excited, and we'll probably be talking about it, is the service level integration, is that clients will be able to pick their own adventure, Oregon Trail for translation, if you will.
Goosebumps. But yeah, I mean, I even remember again early on, like even I think we call it hot folders at the time, is you could put a folder on a client's desktop and say, if you want something translated, dump it in this folder and it will come straight to our desks and we'll give you a quote based on so I think the technology is there. It's again, like, I think client or buyer education is going to be a huge piece of it. But even when you talk about level of services, I'm thinking, okay, put 3 folders on their translation folder. This one I want the full team. This one I want, empty with post editing, and this one I want one translator, and that's it. So you could bucket their folders that you're giving them just on level of service, and that automation is all there. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we can transition the conversation now, Patrick, into this new idea of the new language industry, right? So that was kind of it sounds like I wish I was there. I wasn't there, but it sounds like it was sort of the title of Florian's keynote address was that, hey, this is a new language industry. The term LSI, the term translation language platform, are new and is forming up the new language industry. So I guess the question for us to discuss now is, and we've started to talk it through, is this technology? Is it pure AI? Is it a mindset shift? And my point on that, Patrick, is I think it's all of those things, right? It's the combination of these various technologies, including AI as one of those technologies, and shifting the mindset of both, again, business development people, production people, people that own the language service integrators. It's going to take me a minute to say that. LSIs. I need to start saying LSIs. So the companies, the folks that own these agencies, to say, hey, we're not talking now about, hey, can you email me that Word document? What we're talking about is, where does that content live? How can I go get it? How can I deliver it? How can I automate it? How can I reduce the friction, right? That was a thing we've been talking about for years now. And always one of our focuses is, how do we reduce the friction on translation projects? That's, I think, exactly what we're trying to do. I mean, what do you think, Patrick?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting point to be made too of that not all friction is bad. I think, like I mentioned, like if you just go full guns blazing into automation, like it's probably going to turn out poorly. But like I think thinking through like where you might need to stop in the process, or where, so like again, I think there's good friction, but I think something we'll kind of touch on in a few minutes here is like clients or buyers like just want this, whatever solution it looks like, to just work. Kind of the Apple thing of like, it just works and I don't have to think about it, which is why like I think a lot of people are drawn to Apple products, is like I don't have to think about it. I don't have to sit there while my computer updates for hours every day, like doing the same thing. So I think like having that mindset of like, this just needs to work, and like maybe the buyer doesn't need to see all the behind the scenes things, but they need to know what's happening and know and be confident that it's going to work.
Exactly. One of the main tenets that, I'll hear when I have discussions about Apple products versus, say, Android or Windows products, if we're talking about the desktop versus mobile, is people say, yeah, but, on my Android, I can shove this little digital card in there and grab pictures from the phone, and I can do this and I can do that and I can do all these other little things. Well, Apple makes a conscious decision to say, no, we don't do that. That's not what we do. It's all in the cloud. This is how we integrate. This is how we do. They keep things simple to a path. So you have to sacrifice some things to look for that higher level of automation, higher level of dependability. And I think it's the same with this, right? There's going to be some decision points. For example, our new flavor of our new quotes are going to be complex enough that when we're showing options and such, I can tell you right now, we're not going to have PDFs anymore. Patrick, I know, be still your heart. But we're not going to have PDF quotes anymore, because guess what? Who cares? Because it's an interactive quote. You get to choose service levels. You get to choose options you want or don't want. Well, how does that work in a flat document in a PDF? It doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're just going to send someone a link and be like, go click on the thing you want, boop,
Yep.
hit submit, you're done.
And we've been doing that for over a year now. And there has always been the ability to download a PDF if they needed it. We're taking that away because now the quotes are they're interactive. You can't download an interactive PDF.
That can give you a level of security and compliance too, as treating that as a digital signature. I know that's something that come ISO time, it's like, how did you get all these quotes approved? And we'd be like, well, it was by email. So we were saving emails and doing kind of like not the most high tech thing there, but I think this solution seems to not only work for you, but also help, come audit time. It's like, yep, we've got all these approvals saved in the system, and they're all, we don't have to do any manual work to save them.
And guess what? It triggers the next step in an automation. So when that can be digitized, then you can do the things that we're talking about, which is automate the process. Some things that I think we have to stress, right, in this discussion, Patrick, that, again, I think too many people are focused on, that's it, AI replaces me, I'm done. I can't be a project manager anymore. I can't be a translator. I can't be. And I think, again, you have to focus on AI as the co-pilot. It's not really a replacement.
That's where Microsoft got it from.
Yes. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Or I even like to think of, if I'm envisioning what the project manager of the future, like what they're going to have, it's more of a dashboard, right? It's more of a dashboard to say, here's all my projects that are in flight. Here's all my projects that, are waiting on arrival, in other words, are waiting for tasks to be completed. And there's, going to be all these different tasks that have to happen. And some are human driven, some are AI driven. And obviously the AI driven ones will happen faster. There's going to be QA processes that are attached. And one of the big things that we're working on right now, as well as is agents that will be launching through Slack that will allow our project managers to do different tasks, like, hey, where are my projects that are in flight? And can I generate emails just from a command in Slack that will generate reminders to my vendors, my translators that haven't finished their tasks? So we're looking at how can we take a project manager and amplify their effort through simple commands. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, and I think again, I'm nerding out on process here, but the job in my mind of a good project manager is to make everyone else's job easy. So if you make the project manager's job easy, you're kind of project managing them, which is kind of project manager inception to me at this point. But
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something to be said of like in a workplace, there's really not someone necessarily to project manage the project manager. So like putting that into the equation it could be very, very impactful in terms of like getting them to focus on where they can be effective rather than kind of on some more mundane or admin type of tasks like you're talking about. It's like how do we get those off of their plate so they can focus on doing what they do best?
100%. You know, Patrick, from your time with us, and historically, I hate administrative work that doesn't add value to the final product. We are not in, we did not start this company to generate invoices or create sales orders or purchase orders. No. Our final goal was to say, hey, how do we provide solutions to our clients so they can do translation as seamlessly and easily as possible, right? That was our goal. It's like, how do we make it that language barriers don't exist, right? This is all part of our messaging and our mission. And creating invoices and estimates and, none of that adds value to the final deliverable, right? So we try to hammer out as much of the work that's involved in the administrative side so that we can focus on the important tasks. And what is one of the themes we've been hearing in this whole AI discussion is how do we allow people to concentrate on the high value work? Creating a PO is not high value work. Creating a glossary for a client or tackling on some initiative that says, hey, you don't have to send us emails anymore. We're just going to go help ourselves to the content. Well, all right, now we're talking. That's exciting. So, what does this mean for clients? I think, that's an important part of the discussion, right? Is if we do this correctly, it means that there's seamless integration and reduced friction. Like you say, clients are going to expect the translation to just work. Like an Apple product, it should be intuitive, it should feel easy, and they should be able to work in the tools they're used to working, like Slack or SharePoint or Contentful or AEM, fill in the blank here, right? So some examples, I think, Patrick, we talked a little bit about this and we've talked about these over the time, is that Blackbird is a great example as a language technology platform that allows agencies to put workflows together. But, we've created the Slack translation tool, the SharePoint connector. And I think those are all ways that we take multiple technologies and put them in front of a client by just checking some boxes and choosing some service levels, right? We make it easy for them to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of business 101, right? Is make it easy for people to give you money. That's kind of whenever you are the vendor on the vendor supplier or the vendor buyer side of the equation, it's like, okay, let's make it easy for people to do business with us. And I think, like you said, like buyers are looking for something that they can trust, and something that's transparent, so they know what's happening, like who or what is doing the work that's being done. I think we'll see an increase in wanting things faster. So there might be a push to some of those different levels of services that are a bit faster than the highest quality level of services. So I think that's a trend that will continue. I think we've talked about this a lot too. Is just just not having to worry about it. It's like I work with this LSI. See, I use the new term. I work with this LSI, and they just take care of it, and I get back exactly what I need, and like I don't need to go bug them for extra files or missing this and that. It's like I just what I need is what I get.
Absolutely. Nobody gets excited about saying, I just bought some language services today. No, what they get excited about is, hey, my website is now in 6 languages and I've opened up these new markets. Or, hey, my internal knowledge base for the first time ever is now in sync with the English. And I have it translated and I can get engagement with my workforce that speaks 3 different languages. That's what people want. They could care less about like, oh, I just bought a translation. No, that's not it.
I just bought the WPML connector. No one cares.
No one's excited about that. What they're excited about are the business outcomes. And the value there is that how can I do this easily and seamlessly and not have to fill out a lot of paperwork and send 100 emails to get it done? So how about providers? I think, maybe if we focus a little bit on we talked a little bit about it, but I think, LSPs, generation 1, generation 2, maybe. We were joking. I said, I think we should go back to the 1960s. I like translation bureau. I mean, that's just so, it's like, you picturing like the clocks on the wall and the dictionaries in the bookcase.
Bureau of Translation, Bureau of Language.
Exactly. Right. So, but anyway, that was generation 1, obviously. Generation 2 being language service providers. And now, really going to this new term of LSI. And I think, what it means is the translation providers that don't make this jump to LSIs to be tech-enabled partners for their end clients, probably not going to be here. And I just think any agency can look at this. Even if you're small, there's, Blackbird is a no-code or a low-code integration provider. And there's others, there's others. I think Blackbird is, the cream of the crop. But there's others. There's Be Lazy. There's, even Zapier to some extent. You can introduce some levels of automation in your organization. You can find it. It exists. It's there.
Yeah, I mean, even I'm thinking back to the first translation, I guess LSP that I worked at. If I should use the right term,
it's going to take some work.
I know, right? I was going to say a translation agency, but the first LSP I worked at, we used Trados, so we had to download the package from Trados, send it through Plunet to the translator, get it back, import it, QA it, send it to the editor, the same process through Plunet, do QA, export the package, work locally on Trados on our machine. And that process today is just bonkers. It's like it should go straight from translator to editor to ready for me to do my final QA check and spit out the final file. And none of that should be done locally on an individual's machine. Like that should all be done in the cloud so it can just go to the people who it needs to get to. But even then, I mean, that was 11 years ago at this point. But I'm sure there's still companies that run that way just because they don't know how to get past that, or like, this is how we've always done it. So I think you'll see that's a simple workflow example, but like that's absolutely bonkers that that's how that process worked.
100%, Patrick. I mean, there are many, as you know, we're trying to acquire. So we've had the ability to look, we've been looking at countless number of agencies, and that siloing of information is still kind of the norm in our industry. And that, because part of it is like Plunet wants you to do everything in Plunet, or, Trados Studio. I mean, they want you to generate POs and invoices and such right inside a studio. But then, the missing link is that, well, it's not an accounting system. Our thought was always to build around our ERP system. And I can tell you, we are really putting stuff in our ERP system. I mean, we now have a preprocessor that's technically in our ERP system. So we're actually starting to process files inside our ERP system. So, our thought has been to build out from the source of truth, which, what is the source of truth for most people? The initial order, the quotation, where the data exists of what the costing is and the purchase orders and such, and you build out from there. So that's always been, our credo.
Now that you mentioned that, I'm pretty sure I had to export an XML of word counts from Trados and import that into Plunet to do the costing.
Mm-hmm. That's very common.
But I mean, even again, thinking back to early days of Argo, for me, like to close a project, it was upload files to the file sharing system, and then go back to the accounting system and click project done. That would fire off an email. It would generate an invoice. There was all sorts of automations tied to that. And like you said, it's kind of reducing the administrative burden on anyone of just like, okay, I click this one button and it does 5 things for me. That project's done. It gets out of my list. And it's just kind of, like you said, taking those more mundane or administrative tasks that no one necessarily likes doing and being like, okay, now I click a button and it's done. So just thinking from like a business, I remember a class I took in college was like business process management or something. And it's like, just think of how much more throughput you can get out of your workforce if like you make all this stuff easier. Like how much more efficient do your PMs get? Like they don't need to be tracking POs from vendors because that all lives in the system. Like they just don't need to worry about all of that kind of tangential things that are important, but like no one likes doing them.
Absolutely. Again, focusing on higher value work is the key. And I think that's a good segue to translators, because I think we all have to admit that the translators and the linguists have been, and the desktop publishing people and all the people that are in the production realm of what we do every day, they're the engine of this whole process, right? They're the heart of it. I don't think that's changed. And translation is not dead, it's evolving. And my whole tenet is, listen, AI does the repetitive work, and it should free linguists to focus on nuance, QA, and creativity. And it should, especially QA. We know how monotonous QA can be, especially in Markdown language where there's a lot of tags. So for those of you that don't know how translation of content that's highly formatted for the web or in apps, in mobile applications, to see something in bold, well, there's behind it, there's some little tags that say these are the words that are in bold. And guess what? When you translate, you have to make sure the little tags surround the correct language. That part of the translation process sucks. Nobody likes it, right? So
It's because it's not translation, it's formatting. But that's like
exactly
part of the equation.
It has to, right? Because with most of the tools, you can't deliver the file until the tags are correct. So if AI and the like and these tools help with all of that, let's embrace on the positive. I get it that it's not, gosh, when I started in this business 30 years ago, people would give you a printed document, and translators, pre-Trados, guys, just typing in a flush left Word document. And then, a desktop publisher would have to copy and paste that content into Quark Express or PageMaker or whatever very antiquated tool that nobody even knows what the hell is anymore. That's what that action was. Let's celebrate the fact that we don't have to do that anymore. So you, as the translator, are now the subject matter expert, and your value today is higher than it was. And guess what? All of this was built on your hard work. And I think maybe sometimes that's where that anger is created, is that the AI is built on this large, massive translation memory database. But I would say elevate yourself, stress the importance that you, as the human in the loop, are likely the most important person in the process. And these tools are your allies and not your enemies. That's where I would focus.
Yeah, and I would say too, I think like not only are they subject matter experts on like the translation process and how all of that works, but even digging a level deeper of, I know specialties are always super highly sought after of, I'm a medical translator, I'm a legal translator, I'm whatever, fill in the blank with whatever vertical or industry. But I think those translators become all the more valuable too, especially in some of the more regulated industries and things like that. It's like we might not be able to use AI in these, so I think you'll see a push of that work to people who are specialists in that realm. But yeah, I think if you approach it from the mindset of focusing the translators on actually translating instead of some of the QA or kind of more mundane things that might happen in a translation system, I think they probably love it too. They're like, cool, I don't have to worry about what words to bold anymore. Like I just keep typing and it knows where to stick the bold tags for me. Like that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Patrick, I think that brings us to kind of our wrap up. Let's talk a little bit about lessons learned from today, biggest takeaways. For me, I think I may have gotten up on a soapbox a little bit for part of that, but I think the whole idea here is that this is about coordination of resources. And It's not competition. It's not saying, well, the AI is the strongest piece of this puzzle. No, absolutely not. It's a piece of the puzzle. The humans are a piece of the puzzle. And I think what I challenge those of us in the industry to do is to continue. I don't know about continue. We're going to continue. I'm not sure about the others. We're certainly going to continue building transparent and integrated workflows and sharing with our clients when we're doing what. Hey, this is the piece that AI plays in your workflow, and the service is priced accordingly. The timing is allocated accordingly, and really just maintaining the human side of communication, right? Is that after all, what are we doing in translation? We're creating channels of communication, right? So let's not pull the humans out of this completely. I think they're still an important part of it. Will continue to be an important part of it. That's my big takeaway of kind of the overarching thing. How about you for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting point too of like I think even people who speak the same language still miscommunicate. So introducing robots and different languages into the mix, I don't think you can necessarily expect perfection based on that. Like again, even people who know each other and speak the same language miscommunicate frequently. But I think my big takeaway is that I think the successful LSPs are already considering themselves LSIs, I would say. If you're kind of having a oh shit moment of like, I need to get on this, like you're already behind. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be like a huge deal of like, oh, we're rebranding as an LSI. Like, I don't think you'll see much of that. I think what you call it is what you call it, and that's fine. But I think getting one layer deeper as a buyer to kind of educate yourself on what's going on in the market will pay huge dividends of like, cool, you're using AI. How? And I would just stop right there and see what the provider is saying, because it will be very telling of kind of, like I said, I saw that marketing mumbo jumbo post on LinkedIn. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And like, I'm familiar with this industry. So when you say kind of just we're AI superpowered all in one, it's like, what are you actually talking about?
We're going to continue to see more of that, Patrick. You know, where there's complexity, what I found is our industry loves to provide mysticism. You know, I've often said that, you know, people want to hide this stuff in a box and, you know, make it super complex and not necessarily give the nuance to the clients, because what does that do? That gives the clients some power. And you know, our tenet all along has been that yes, we should give clients power and they should understand what they're buying. So we will continue on that track. And I am so excited because I think we're going to have some great shows coming up. This wraps this episode of Translation Confidential, but stay tuned. We're going to continue to talk about all the changes in the industry. Thanks for joining us.